Welcome to Ponchatoula Live. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a terrific guest. This is someone that needs no introduction, but I'll go ahead and give a brief one anyway. He served our country in the military. He served several communities as a patrol officer, as a police chief, and now as our high sheriff. Best of all, the high sheriff of Tangipahoa Parish comes from right here in Ponchatoula, the Beatico area, Ponchatoula High School. He's a local boy who's come back home to service. So, with no further ado, Sheriff Gerald Sticker, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Parker. I appreciate you having me, and I am honored. I've watched your show for the last couple of years on and off. I saw it, and I was waiting on the invite. I wasn't going to invite myself, but thank you. I do
Well, we know you
appreciate it.
were busy getting started. I didn't want to waste any of your time in that
We've
first
been a
year in
little
office.
busy, yes, sir.
It's I guess you're about 14 months in, and it's hectic. And if we don't mind, Sheriff, why don't we kick things off with you just telling our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Like you said, I grew up here in the little community of Beatico, and my mom's from from Covington over in St. Tammany. My dad's raised in the Beatico area, and actually,
Mhm.
my family, I've traced them back to the early 1800s. Is
Oh
actually
wow,
a Lawrence Sticker buried in the Madisonville Cemetery from the Battle of New Orleans, War of 1812. So,
that's about as
we
far
could.
back as it goes.
Yeah, I'm sure it's further than that, but we go back a little ways. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, so I grew up in BDCO. I went to Champ Cooper School, and another local legend, Miss Glenda Dufresh, was my
Oh
kindergarten
yeah.
teacher. And man,
Mhm.
she's still serving and working in our school system. And I
She's
had
amazing, and
conversation.
she gets out there with her husband and cuts grass in our neighborhood too. She hustles.
Yeah,
She
she's a
doesn't let the heat
warrior.
stop her. Yeah.
Right. And, I just thanked her, and then obviously we all have our favorite teacher, of
Mhm.
kindergarten through, high school. And, I made a point to let her know during the campaign. I said,
Yeah.
I know you don't remember me because you've had thousands of students since 1972. But just let her know what an impact that she had on me, and reminded her that she had no idea that little cotton top. I'm gray haired now, but that little cotton top at the time would one day be the sheriff of
Yeah.
Tangipahoa Parish. And so, God bless our teachers.
Well, that's amazing. And the sheriff too before you, my father has a history with the Dufreshes too, going back. When you see him, you have to ask him about the story of Dad and Mr. Billy Dufresh and Danny, and I don't know if Julian was there. He was younger, but once upon a time, those guys got in a little trouble for starting a fire behind my parents' house by accident.
Oh, well, hopefully the statute of limitations is
Yeah,
expired,
oh
so
yeah,
they can
yeah. I
tell
think
their story now.
they were catching dragonflies on fire, and anyway, doing what
It
boys would
happens.
do in the 50s that none of us would recommend our kids do. And anyway, it's a pretty dramatic story. But yeah, those guys go way back. Well, thank you for sharing that, Sheriff. Like, for one, it strikes me if you've been here since the War of 1812, your family. A few episodes back, Darren Bennett was on here with his father, Mr. Sonny, and he kind of share the term with us in Ponchatoula. You either come here or are from here, and it doesn't get more from here than going back to 1812 or whatever. But why don't you tell us what life was like growing up in Beatico, going to Champ Cooper? Obviously, I thank you for sharing your love for Miss Dufresh, your teacher. But what was it like in those good old days in the late 70s and early 80s?
Well, man, looking back, I would go back in a heartbeat to those days. No,
Amen.
before social media, before when teachers could actually teach. One of my football coach and PE coach, Mr. Carl Bardwell, who he passed away last year, and it's just a whole different environment, a whole different climate where teachers could discipline and teach. We did our hunter safety on the back of the football field at Champ Cooper, where we shot skeet and got our hunter's education
Cool.
card. That's
Yeah.
unheard of in today's world.
Right. Right.
And so it was just, I mean, obviously it was a simpler time. I think there may have been 300 plus kids from kindergarten through eighth grade, and we all went to, one school. And we had, just like every school, we had our schoolyard bully, and but it was good. It was a lot simpler and
Right.
more community. But you lose that, as and it's just the natural course of things, right? As time goes on, populations grow, economies change, and it's just we're wherever evolving or devolving, whichever you want to look at it as. And
Yeah, it brings
you know
this mixed bag where economically it helps us and props things up, and businesses can grow and restaurants are more abundant and whatnot, but it certainly changes the small town flavor of things, you know.
It does. And again,
Country
it's
is
a
important.
natural, yeah, it's a natural progression of things. You can't fault someone for wanting a better life and a safer community for their families. And, growing up, Highway 22 from BDCO all the way to Springfield, I don't think there was one subdivision that I can recall. And now, you can't throw a rock on 22 without, hitting.
Uh-oh, it looks like we've lost the sheriff there. I hope he comes back on. Folks, thank you for your patience with this technical difficulty. We are on with Sheriff Gerald Sticker, who we have a tech blurb here that hopefully will get resolved soon. I appreciate that. Sheriff, I don't know if you can hear me or see me. Just know right now we're looking at a blank screen. So I don't really have the ability. I'm not tech savvy enough to figure out what the problem is, folks, other than to note that there is one here. Let me see what I can do here. I'm now the sheriff's connection has gone from a blank screen to no screen. That doesn't seem like a positive development, but hopefully he's in the process of trying to log back on. So what I'll do here, I'll try to kill a minute or two while we wait. As you know, Parker Layrisson here, Ponchatoula Live, and I have good news to report. Sheriff Sticker is back with us. Sheriff, thank you for quickly resolving that problem. I need you here on this show. I can't do it on my own. I was flubbing it. So please continue what you were saying. We were talking about, I think the last thing I heard from you was, there were no subdivisions coming up on Highway 22 back in the day. Now you can't throw a rock in any direction without seeing one, and kind of what that means for our community.
No, absolutely. And so, we continue to grow as a parish, and, families continue to move here, and that's a great thing. But, I consider myself blessed that I grew up in an era before we got, too technology involved, and I'm just able to enjoy the simple things in life, like people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I share that with you, and I know Champ Cooper. It was a special community. And I was a few years behind you in school. Gary Stang has been on the show talking about it. We won't tell Gary, if you're watching, we won't say how many years before the sheriff you were coming through Champ Cooper. But I always admired kind of the cohesion and unity they had out there. We would go out there to play Champ Cooper and sports, football, basketball. Some of my best buddies were in school there then, like folks like J.J. Gill. And anyway, it was just those Cooper boys. I mean, they had a unity. They were kind of more like brothers or cousins and classmates in a way, all having come up together all those years at one little school. And you're right, it's grown by leaps and bounds. I look at the place now, sponsor teams out there. My buddy Billy Gildner is one of the coaches, and it's a big little school, if that makes sense. It's a different animal.
Oh, absolutely. I met with Miss Stilley, our school board superintendent, last week, one of many meetings we've had. And, I just got off the phone with Chief David Atkins, and, we're talking about, he had called me because there's congestion problems with the school traffic in front of 8th Ward Volunteer Fire Department. So if we have any school moms or dad that are in that drop-off line going to Champ Cooper, this is my chance for a free plug. Please don't block the driveway to the 8th Ward Volunteer Fire Department. So,
Right.
and it's a lot of traffic congestion. I don't think anybody rides a school bus anymore.
Yeah, no, you're right. It seems far less common than it did when we were growing up. And
Sure.
of course, there are more students, there are more cars, and if they're not, huddled in on one bus, it really makes for a lot of traffic. I'm glad you gave the 8th Ward Department, some props. Those guys have done great work out there for many years. As a car accident lawyer, I have seen them respond to countless really dangerous and life-threatening, calls, and they do a great job. So we're here, folks, with Sheriff Sticker. We're talking about his childhood, growing up in Bedico, growing up, at school in Champ Cooper. What are some lessons you recall, Sheriff, that you got early in your whether from your home, your parents, your teachers, your school, your friends? What are some things that you learned back then that stuck with you and still serve you today?
Well, my dad, of course, he's been passed about 17 years now. And of course, he had a a lot of old country sayings, and
Mine too.
his most common one was, boy, you need to use that head for something else besides a hat rack. And with
I
his
love
way of telling me to think through things. I had more
right,
testosterone and brain cells, as we do as young men. And
right.
so he weathered the storm bringing me up. And I'm just grateful for, number one, my parents. I tell people that, we talk about drug problems, or the drug problem I had. I was drugged to church Sunday morning, Sunday nights, Tuesday nights for
Right.
youth night, Wednesday night Bible or prayer meeting. And God help us, if it was during the summertime, we went to every vacation Bible school in the community. It didn't matter
Yeah.
which denomination it was. And but I'm just grateful for that
What
grounding
church
for
did
the
y'all go to, Sheriff?
sir.
What church did you go to growing
So
up?
we grew up in Betico Baptist Church.
Okay,
And
yeah, great
so
church.
just a little side story, my wife Tanya, as we talked, a little bit
Wait,
earlier,
the beautiful former Tanya DeLotte, Strawberry Queen, well known. Yeah. I'm sorry to
correct.
interrupt you. Just want to make sure
No,
you know who
it's
we're talking about.
she of
Believe it
course
or not,
she
Sheriff, I'm sorry. She was famous around here before you were.
That's correct. I told her she should have been running for office and not me. So she's a wonderful woman. But in Betico Baptist Church, I think I was 16. She was like 15. We were boyfriend and girlfriend. And she still reminds me that I broke up with her. And but when you look at me and you look at her, I was like, even then, being a knothead country boy, I knew I didn't stand a chance. And so
That's funny.
so I just cut my losses and moved on. And we reconnected 30 something years later at a
Yeah.
Strawberry Queens pageant of all things. I went to root my niece Katie Robinson, who's another
Uh-huh.
Strawberry Queen from 9 years ago, I think. And so we've pretty much been inseparable since then. So
That's great. Well, I grew up playing ball with her brother Bert. So
yep.
she and her sister and that whole family have always been special to me. I'd spend the night over there before or after games back in the day. And it's just a great family. And I was really happy to see the two of you hook up and join because it just seems like a great fit. But I got to tell you, as a guy, as a Catholic boy who grew up at St. Joe, like my dad did before me and my kids did after me, I never had any idea of what you just described, that kind of hardcore Baptist upbringing, until I married another Strawberry Queen, my wife Brandy, and she'd grown up in one of these little community churches, and now she's got me every Sunday in the pew at First Baptist here. But Wednesday night, my kids are doing that. VBS, they're doing it there. They're doing it at the Grandma's Church in Independence and all over. And and from my perspective, it's just a great way to raise kids, because you can't be out there getting in trouble, messing with drugs and doing other stuff if you're, under the scope of some mother hen in a church pew. And I
Right.
just think it helps you make the right kind of friends, and hopefully that leads to making the right kind of decisions.
Well, they definitely did their job and laying the groundwork, and like I say, despite my parents' best parenting, and we all, stray off the path coming up. We all make our mistakes, and
Oh yeah,
we all made them, and I've made mine, and
me
but
too.
that's
Any
where
faults I have are my own, not my parents.
100% I own it. It's not because of anything, it's because of me. And
Yeah,
but that's where grace comes in. But
amen.
yeah, we talked a little bit earlier. In BD code, like I said, it's very rural.
Mhm.
We had those three churches in a bar room. There was we had a community center, but there was
Yeah,
not really any organized sports. And so to go in organized sports or anything extracurricular, we had to go to town, as they say. And
right.
we come into Ponchatoula, and that's where I played on PV Realtors Little League baseball team, and that's where I really started
Yeah,
branching out. Other than that, at Champ Cooper, it's pretty much BDCO, Lee's Landon, Robert, and then
right.
we moved to Ponchatoula, and that's where I met the Ponchatoula proper people, if you will. People that come from Martha's
Town
Vineyard,
folk.
and that's right.
Well, speaking of the town folk, I love how you mentioned playing for PV Realtors, because my dad's first coach was Mr. Reggie PV, the founder of PV Realtors. And, that was in the 50s. And you come along in the 70s, and here we are in 2020 something. And, PV Realtors is still there as an institution.
So,
And it's like you can go, when we're talking churches, you can see, Mr. Reggie Peavy's grandson, Gabe Peavy,
that's
occasionally
right.
preaching in the Baptist churches all over here. Great guy, just got married. It's just a wonderful family, and they got both, corners covered. Baptist with this sect and Catholic with most of them, and one of the real blessings of this show was to get to interview Mr. Reggie. So thanks for sharing that coming up. If you don't mind, Sheriff, I want to share with you here a comment we've got coming in here from a
Sure.
dear friend of mine that I went to Ponchatoula High School with. And speaking of ballparks, and he runs PARD. This is Mark Verbois, and Mark says special thanks to Sheriff Sticker to be accessible and available. He says that you, Sheriff, helped him out on a few occasions, and he knows you have a tough role as sheriff, and he appreciates the help you've offered, and not just you, but your officers and staff as well. So, Mark, thank you for watching the show. Thank you for sharing that. But Sheriff Sticker, how does it feel to get a comment like that coming in from somebody who's so well respected here in Ponchatoula?
Well, and it doesn't, I don't take that lightly at all. Thank you, Mark, by the way, for that. We do, a lot of times they say we have a thankless job, but I really don't feel that way. Look, we all have our detractors, and if you're in any leadership position, you'll have people that, disagree with you, on whatever merit. But I will say that there's not a week that goes by if I'm not sitting in a breakfast spot and they meet, or at the cafe in Kentwood, or in Ponchatoula somewhere, that someone doesn't come up to me, and some of them I may have never met, and they said, and some of them say, look, I voted for you, I've never met you, but thank you. You're doing a great job. And some will come up to me and say, look, I didn't know you, I didn't vote for you, but you now have my support. They said, I
Yeah,
appreciate you. And I realized that I have 139,000 bosses, right? Or how many citizens we have in this parish.
it's amazing
And
to think we're that big now, but yeah, you're
yeah,
right.
and I refuse to call myself a politician. I'm a people person. Campaigning, if you will, to get the job. I worked this parish from one end to the other, and I had a lot of great people that supported me and helped me get to where I'm at. And far be it from me now that I am elected, for people like Mark to call, or someone else, even if I don't know, that they call me and I don't pick up the phone and give them 2 minutes. And
Mhm.
every problem is ultimately, may not be a sheriff problem, it may get solved
Right.
further down the pipeline, but every problem ultimately is a sheriff problem, and I understand that 100%. And I'm blessed to serve a lot of great people in this parish.
Hmm. Well, you mentioned every problem might not be a sheriff problem. It reminds me when I was a kid in the summer, my dad would bring us to the sheriff's office with him in Amite. And, we were just up there for the free lunch. And then maybe he'd take us to play golf or something at, the little Amite golf course afterwards. But we were very bored with having to wait around while he did his job that morning and throughout the day. And I'll never forget one time when I was in high school, this lady came in there and I was kind of sitting on the couch reading a book or whatever. This is, pre cell phone. There was nothing fun to do, so I'm over there
That's
reading
right.
a book. And the lady's whole thing was she wanted cable. She lived on some country road, and she wanted them to bring some cable out there so she could watch cable TV. And I'm thinking, what could be less sheriff than that? It's nothing to do with crime fighting or tax collection or any of the many responsibilities you have.
So,
But sure enough, as soon as she left, Dad called in his secretary and said, "Get Congressman Livingston on the phone, this and that." And I think they ended up getting the lady some cable.
no, absolutely. And
So it's
it's
kind of like your dad always said it was like being pawpaw of the parish. People are going to come to you on Monday morning with their problems, and maybe it fits your job description, maybe it doesn't. But I thank you for embracing it with such a welcoming attitude. So, folks, before we take down Mark's comment, again, I want to thank Mark Verbois for tuning in and
yes.
sharing this. But if you're watching us live and you'd like to, ask the sheriff a question, say something nice like Mark has, etc., feel free to do so. And as your host, I'll do my best to get you into the show. So we are here, as you know, with Sheriff Gerald Sticker. We've been kind of talking about his upbringing. Let's talk, about the PHS years, because
Sure.
pretty soon you're going to go from a little kid who, Champ Cooper playing in the woods with your buddies to a
Right.
grown man entering the military,
Sure.
and it's like life and death. Life is serious. You didn't go and hide in some fraternity like me and drink beer for 4 years and goof off. You went straight into the thick of it. So how did you get there? What was the chapter like when you come through Ponchatoula High School? Kind of who mentored you and molded you up to be the man you would be to enter such serious community and national service so early?
Sure. So, like I said, from the time I was probably 9 or 10, I knew my calling was, number one, to go in the Marine Corps, and number two, in law enforcement. And while I was at, Ponchatoula High School, that's the first time that I met your dad. I had an opportunity for a career day, and
That's
uh, and got to listen to your dad talk and tell some stories about the sheriff's office and his role. And sitting there, I no inclination. My goal was maybe just be a police officer at that point. I just knew I wanted to put bad guys in jail, and so, he made an impression on me, obviously, at that career day. And I was in vocational ag, FFA and all that. And so we get off half a day and we would go work. Well, my half day job and summer job was at Bowling Supermarket, back where the new city hall's at. It used to be the old Bowling
yeah.
Supermarket. And so,
My cousin John Vaughn was a bag boy there. I remember
yeah.
visiting when I was a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked
I love
there with
this
the
story.
uh the Ernst boys. So
Yeah,
Glenn and
yeah.
Lester, if they live over on Sisters Road, or did coming up, and so if they happen to be listening, hi. But my manager there, Mr. Pete, he was a Vietnam era Marine, and he's real brash. And I was running the produce section of Bowman Supermarket. That was my area of responsibility, and he'd come
Wait, now
through
my
with.
little brother was produce guy at Winn-Dixie, which is where Rouse's now is. He was very proud of that, man. I'm going to tell you, I don't know how it went at Bonings, but in the 1990s when Louis was in school, and man, he would look down his nose at those guys, stocking other things. He thought produce was where it's at. So
We did. Oh, absolutely. And Mr. Pete's one of his many words to me. He says, you work this rack, and he says, if you wouldn't serve it to your mother, don't leave it on this rack. If it's
that's
spoiled or
great.
if it looks bad, he said, we only want the best stuff. And so he set the bar. And when I went to one of the times coming through, he says, Sticker. I said, yes, sir, Mr. Pete. He says, I ain't much on compliments. He says, but as long as I'm not chewing your ass, you're doing a good job. And I said, well, thank you, Mr. Pete. And that was as close as I ever got to a compliment from
Yeah.
him. And so, I go through, I'm in my senior year. I have a December birthday, so I don't turn 17 till after I graduate high school, or
Oh, wow.
18 rather, I'm sorry. And, I went and talked to my parents, and they agreed to sign the papers. And we went to Sergeant Bill was my recruiter by the old Hammond Square Mall. And, so, Mr. Pete was excited. He was proud that I was going to the Marine Corps. And
I
he
bet.
says, if I can give you any advice, he says, you're going to get there, and there's squad leaders and, platoon leaders. He said, they're going to catch the worst beatings of all. And he says, the second group is going to catch the worst beatings of all is the people that are in the back of the pack that are falling out, not handling their business. He said, if I could give you any best advice, he said, you stay in the middle of the pack. There's safety in numbers. And so, and of course, I look back
Yeah.
now, especially I had when my sons were 17 and where they're at, and they're wonderful young men now, but I just couldn't
Mhm.
imagine my kids at 17 leaving. But, growing up in Beatico, there was no upward mobility. College wasn't an option for me. Like I told you earlier, I majored in quantum physics. I took up time and space. I care nothing about school. And so, but I just looked around and um, I just didn't see a way out of the little community of BDCO. Like I said, I loved it, but I just knew I lived in a big world and there had to be something more
Yeah, there
to it.
wasn't the economic engine there to employ you, so
Yeah,
where you could support a family. It
yeah,
wasn't like
and
today. Now we drive through there and we see expensive big houses going up and big subdivisions every day, and that was a different animal. If
yeah.
you don't mind, Sheriff, I'm going to interrupt us here because we got some more good comments coming in that I want to share with you. First is our mayor, Wesley Daniels. Mayor Daniels, thank you for tuning in.
And Mr. Mayor,
And I appreciate you sharing your time with me today so we could grab a cup of coffee this morning and catch up. But Mayor Daniels says, Sheriff, thank you for being a friend of Ponchatoula. So that's really special. Tell me, Sheriff, if you don't mind, how important is it to have valuable working relationships with folks like the mayor, not just in times like hurricane season when things can get hectic, but throughout the year? How
absolutely.
important is that?
Well, look, I mean, everything nobody accomplishes anything of any value on their own. Short of God that created the world in 6 days on his own. Everybody else that I know has got to where they are via relationships. And just like you were telling the story about your dad earlier with the cable situation with that nice lady. It's your dad. If he didn't have that relationship, he could not have helped her. And and so, the one thing I've learned is that when you're in a time of crisis, that's not the time to go introduce yourself to
Right.
someone and ask for help and have to,
Excellent point.
you need to be on a first name basis with your constituency, whether it's your citizen base, whether it's your other elected officials, whether it's, the other police chiefs. And, I've known and respected Bree for a long time, and he and I were in the Louisiana Chiefs Association together when I was a police
Right.
chief. And one of the very first people that I went and talked to when I decided to run, well, the very first person outside of my wife was Bree, because I respected that relationship and I respect him. And
Well, I
and
know he
so
feels the same way about you. It's a mutual
uh,
respect.
yeah,
I love what your point is. The crisis is not the time to introduce yourself. And so before I put the mayor's comment down, since you mentioned Bree, I'll tell you a funny story. Um, Once upon a time, Bree and I were roommates, and I was living in a house Bree owned. He decided to get married on very short notice, and so I had a week to get out. And thankfully, my friend Wesley, and in the house that I owned, I was renting out, so I couldn't get there for months, while I had to let my tenant finish their term. But Wesley was kind enough to let me live at his house. But it was only because we had the decades of relationship that I could go to him on a few days' notice and say, hey, you got an extra room. So, Mayor, 20 plus years later, thank you again for putting me up back in the day. But that's a great point. You just never know when you're going to need something. So, making those relationships ahead of time is the important way to do it.
absolutely.
Another great person in our community is Brian Martin, who folks may
Yes.
remember from prior
Yeah.
shows. He says, Sheriff, that you and I are two fine gentlemen. Brian, thank you so much for
Thank
that.
you.
Um, Sheriff, when you hear from folks like this in the community, Mark, Wesley, Brian, I think you just got to store that somewhere to remember that feedback, because you alluded to the fact earlier that everybody's not going to be a fan. I
Sure.
mean, my family's been blessed. I watched my dad and my brother win 12 consecutive elections. I think everyone since Dad's first race in 1979 was basically a landslide, but they haven't had a race yet where they didn't have a very sizable, maybe a quarter of the people on their best day, a third of the people on an average
Sure.
day that were voting against them and telling them about it and telling other people. So, what are some lessons you've had to learn as you've navigated the kind of, because the high sheriff is kind of the old term for the position.
Sure.
Your life changes a bit, kind of like it does for a United States president or governor or whoever, in that it's hard to make new friends. You don't really know who's got an angle and what their thing is. And at the same time, other people are coming at you, calling for your head. How do you navigate those highs and lows?
Well, and look, I'm human like anybody else, and I've had, people take shots at me, and I'm the elected official, and I'm the, the government, if you will. So, it's okay to hate on me, but at the end of the day, look, I'm a husband, I'm a father, a grandfather, but I just, God's called me to this, and so I just got to keep reminding myself that. The two things that people don't like, they don't like the way things are, and they don't like change. And so every situation that I go into, I just try to look at the situation, take a 30,000-foot view of it, and just make objective decisions. And if I can't help somebody, then I don't go out of my way to hurt them. And if I have to, if me helping somebody means hurting somebody else, then I can't help that person. And the one thing that I ran on, my mantra or slogan, if you will, was law enforcement or law and order, not politics. And that's hard to do in a very political
Yeah,
position, especially in Louisiana.
for
Louisiana
sure.
sheriffs are unlike any other sheriffs in the country. I don't, every other sheriff in the country has a county manager or a county
Right.
board to answer to. The sheriff in Louisiana is the office, and
Yeah,
they
and
are autonomous.
from chief law enforcement to tax collector, you name it. There's no civil service.
Yeah,
There's no council to answer to, or manager, as you mentioned. It's
sure.
unique. And one of these books back here, John McGinnis has a great book, and he talks about the power of the Louisiana sheriff and how it's kind of unique. Um, so let's talk about the office now. You mentioned kind of what you ran on, law and order over politics.
Mhm.
You've now been at the job about a year. Let's talk about how it's going. What are some accomplishments you're proud of, and just kind of how for those of us like for me who goes from work to watching kids to whatever, I don't really read the paper or know like what should I know about the good things y'all are doing at TPSO?
Well, the 14 months now that we've been in office, of course, we come in and, the jail is the Achilles heel of any sheriff's office. And
Right.
there was an escape right before I took over, and that bled into, me taking over office. And then we had an escape of our own, and you're just dealing with manpower shortages and process failures, and this, the public scrutiny that comes with that. And I remember going into jail, I'm like, how hard is it to lock a door, but when you're short staffed and you got
Yeah.
these men and women that are working sometimes double shifts, they're working 17, 18 hours a day, and they
Mhm.
got 5, 6 different jobs to do. um, Mistakes are made, and so I got to take that into consideration. And you own it. Whenever something bad happens, I take the lead. Whenever something good happens, we give the credit. And so, obviously, but the jail, I will tell you, we just had our latest DOC audit this past was 2 days ago, and we passed with flying colors. And
Oh, that's
still some
great
things we
news.
got to work on, but security wise, process wise, log books, everything that we're supposed to be doing, we're doing. And
Yeah.
we stepped up. We mandated specific trainings for our corrections deputies in the jail,
Mhm.
more over and above what the law requires them to get. And so I'll see these deputies now acting with more confidence because they know what they can do, what they can't do.
Right.
We're able to get $250,000 in fentanyl money, grant money. That's tax money that the citizens of this parish paid out, sent to Washington D.C., sent to Louisiana, to the Baton
Mhm.
Rouge. I brought 250,000 of that back, and we put a full body scanner inside that jail. So we're
Oh,
waiting
that's
on final
great.
approval from an agency, a state agency, and we will be live with it. And everyone that gets booked into that jail will walk through it. Employees walk through it. I'm going to walk through it when I hit the jail, and it's just to help weed out contraband, narcotics, weapons, to make that jail as safe as we can possibly make it.
Yeah. Well,
And
and I
so,
think people sometimes forget just how old that jail is. My dad took over the sheriff's office. He won in 1979, and back then the jail was on the third floor of the existing courthouse.
that's right.
It only housed like 50 people, so we're talking probably a tenth of what your jail. And so they got to work and built that jail. But heck, this old bald gray haired guy you're talking to was a little kid. It's like that was literally almost 50 years ago. And
Yes.
so, there has been very little improvement done to it. It's just, and you're talking about, a jail. They don't age like a stately brick mansion, right? It just,
It's,
the
it's,
facility that you inherited, I guess I'm getting at, is
sure.
really old and tattered and probably in great need. And so, and that's just one of many problems I would imagine that
Mhm.
you took over. So
No,
I admire your
absolutely.
approach to
Yeah.
that.
And a lot of people, they don't understand the dynamic. They think that I own the jail. Parish government actually owns the jail. They own the brick and mortar.
Right.
And as sheriff, I'm responsible. I'm the tenant and they're the landlord. I'm responsible for operating the jail. So all the stuff you see operationally, but then the general maintenance stuff too, we're responsible because like you said, it's hard miles, these
Yeah.
inmates. If they can find a way to tear something up, they're going to tear it up. And so, I'll commend President Miller and his team. They have actually a jail committee, made up of a couple parish council people and other parish officials. We have a jail team in the sheriff's office, and both of our teams work together as one to address safety
Yeah.
concerns in the jail. And we have an inmate population, like you said. We have grown. There's 560 beds in that jail, and every one of them is full every day.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're over
Well, with
capacity.
139,000 people here, that tracks. I mean, that's
Yes,
kind of what we
it
need.
stays full, and it's a
Yeah.
revolving door. Look, every day, we're booking anywhere from 12 to 20 people into that jail every day, and
Yeah.
so we're moving inmates out constantly to other facilities. Some of them are, you got to triage it, because
Yeah.
DOC, the DOJ, they're going to come down on us if we don't have people with beds to sleep in.
Yeah.
The public in general, they don't really, the jail's not at the top of their list of concerns because they think, they committed crimes, that's where they need to be. But And I firmly believe that as well. And I'm all about, discipline and justice. But I'm also, I'm in charge of those men and women. And but for the grace of God, that could be, me sitting there or one of my family members. And so we got to do our due diligence to take care of them and do the level best that we can to keep them safe.
Yeah, because you've got constitutional obligations to these prisoners that by law you have to uphold. You're responsible for their safety as so no matter how culpable they may be, you have to do that.
Sure.
And I'm so glad to hear that you're working in concert with the parish team. Parish President Robbie Miller, Joe Thomas, his
That's
staff
right.
do a great job. I don't know all the councilmen. I know we're blessed with two great council women down here in Ponchatoula at the
Right.
parish level. Some really fine men as you walk, and women as you go up the way. Nick Joseph comes to mind as one of my
Absolutely.
heroes. But I'm sure it takes a village to do something that big with so little resources. Because I know it was always a big challenge for my dad, and
Yes.
clearly there were a lot of problems in the administration before yours.
Right.
We've got another comment coming in from another community leader. Well, it's going to make you feel good just because of who it's coming from and what he says. But Mr. Russell Milton, who we all love, I especially love because he was like the pawpaw to my kids when they were at Strawberry
Yep.
Castle. But Mr. Russell says that you're doing a great job, Sheriff.
Well, thank
So
you.
that's got to really feel good. Mr. Russell, thank you for tuning in. I know it's back to school season for you and Miss Diane and all of your family over at Strawberry Castle. Y'all are taking good care of my little great nephew over there. So thank you for that. Sheriff, I need to respect your time, and so I don't want to
Sure.
keep you much longer. What else at the sheriff's office would you like to talk about? Whether we're talking accomplishments or challenges
Sure.
or what's next?
Yeah, notwithstanding the jail, and we've made great strides there. One of the things that we did was go through and audit our budget, and we triaged a lot of things. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we increased salaries by 30%. And as any new sheriff comes in, I'm sure your dad did it, and the man or woman that comes after me, whenever that may be, they're going to do things differently again. Wasn't necessarily bad spins, but I had to make decisions on what my priorities were going to be. And so some things we had to do without. We killed some contracts were unnecessary. We renegotiated some contracts. There was like 50 open billets that we couldn't fill across the sheriff's office because of pay. So I had to unfund some of those positions so
Mhm.
that I can increase some of those salaries. And things like one of the first things I did was issue duty weapons to all the deputies. On top
Bree
of a
told me that. I was so excited to hear that because I know how underfunded that department is, how underpaid those deputies were, and to think they had to pay for their own sidearm. Really, I'm glad you changed that. It helps you
sure.
compete better with other agencies, I would
And we
imagine.
applied, and we applied. I think it was like $80,000 in grant money to that weapons purchase. And
Mhm.
so, you
That's great.
know, but before, on top of having a crummy salary, you had to go buy your own duty weapon and your own
Yeah,
duty belt and your gear to come to work. We're outfitting these men and women, and so
right.
we're investing in them. Just this past year, our report writing software was very antiquated. And so we upgraded our report writing software, and that's CAD, computer aided dispatching, our jail management software. It's the same software that we do all of our reports and investigations in. And it's a seamless patch over to the DA's office. And it's the same system that Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office uses. And so it's the same district attorney's office and same judges that
Yeah,
try both of them. So we just kind of unified in that front. There again, brand new body cams, tasers, all that stuff was severely outdated. And my goal, everything that I do is employee driven. If I can take care of those men and women, if I can equip them, if I can train them, they're going to do a great job for our citizens. And that's why we're here at the end of the day, to serve our citizens. I want to keep my men and women equipped, trained, and safe, because if they're educated and equipped, they're going to be less likely to be violating people's rights out there on the street, and they're going to do a better job. They're going to go home safe at the end of the day. And, at the end of the day, that's how I'll do a good job as sheriff, if my men and women are properly equipped and doing a good
right.
job. And so, and on that front, I guess last thing we can touch on is that, it's out and about. And, this November, I think 18th, we'll be on the ballot, just
Right.
asking the citizens of our parish to consider our sales tax initiative. And so we're giving up a 10 mil property tax.
So, well,
And
Sheriff, if you don't mind, I'm going to just interject briefly while we're going to put up on the screen here a link
sure.
to your website, tpso.org, and they can go from there, I think, with a slash on vote. And this talks about your plan for fund in the future. And forgive me for interrupting. Please,
Sure.
please continue. I just wanted you to know I was going to put that on the screen for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So anybody, this is up live on our website. It's tpso.org/vote. They can go there, and I'm a visual learner. And I said, look, we need to make this thing so simple that a sheriff can understand it. And so, we have a payroll study in there showing where TPSO is at in relation to other surrounding law enforcement agencies. We have a picture of a deputy showing what it actually costs to hire, train, equip a deputy, and the first year costs. And by the way, after we spend that money, that's the slide that's up right now. And that deputy's leaving, and that's money that we're just throwing away that we're investing in somebody else's law enforcement agency. They're going to Bree, they're going to, Edwin and other chiefs and other sheriff's offices. And, every bit of this money will go towards, I'm not going to make another dime off of this. State law says what sheriffs and judges make. So my salary is my salary. It's set, but every bit of this is going to go to.
You're not allowed to go in there and pay yourself $250,000 like the marshal. You're stuck where you are. That's important for people to know. Yeah, it's going to the deputies and the community. I hope the sheriff looks like maybe he's gone again. Tech problems. I hope I didn't trigger that with that mention of the $1 million marshal. But folks, we're here with Sheriff Sticker. I'm hopeful that he can come back on the show for us to close this out. We had a brief tech glitch earlier, and this appears to be something similar. But while he does that, I'll go through here. He mentioned that there are a ton of infographics here, if you will, that show you, what things cost, what their plans are. And of course, we're talking about the TPSO proposed tax. This show's not political. I'm not here to tell you how to vote. That's your own decision to make. But I will tell you that the sheriff has laid out a bevy of information here at tpso.org. So hopefully Sheriff Sticker can get back to us. This has been a fun show, and we are nearing the end. For those of you that are, here we go. I'm going to get him back here. Got you back, Sheriff.
And it knocked me off. I apologize.
No, that's okay. So, I was doing my best.
Every bit of this is to pay existing deputies wage, and to hire upwards of 50 additional law enforcement deputies. That's school resource officers, that's patrol, that's detectives, that's jailers, and the equipment to put them in. Police cars aren't $30,000 anymore. It costs between 60 and 70 grand for a fully outfitted police unit.
Wow.
And the insurance and all the the bells and whistles that go with it. And my main goal here is that right now we're reactive. We're short staffed. I have a semblance of a narcotics unit. I have a semblance of a traffic unit. But we are ill equipped. And people, the men and women of this parish, they elected me to do the job, but I need the proper funding to do it.
Yeah. How does our funding compare here in Tangipahoa to the 63 other parishes?
So we're like number 2 at the bottom of the barrel. We're the second lowest funded.
Wow.
There's some very wealthy parishes. Some of them that have refineries and big industry, and maybe we'll get to that at some point in the future. But right now we rely on either. We have 2 millages. We don't have any sales tax, and so we operate off of 2 millages. One I think is a 7.8 mil, which is constitutionally protected, but that other 10 mil, we're giving that up. And
so you're not asking to go from being the top 10 guy to the top 2 guy. Folks, we're not the 63rd poorest parish in the state. I mean, we have a major university, intersecting interstates, some big businesses, not as many as we'd like. And Parish President Miller and his team are working on that. If this tax were to pass, Sheriff, where would it put us roughly compared to other parishes?
I don't know exactly compared to other
Mhm.
parishes, but if you look at the payroll study that we have on there, it will move us just over halfway up that list of surrounding agencies that are similarly situated. So
So
it's just,
competitive, but not leading the pack. You're not
yeah,
asking for a Rolls Royce here. You're asking for
yes.
a good, reliable new Chevy. It sounds like.
No, absolutely. This is to put us in the game.
Yeah.
And if you ride around the roads of this parish and probably inside the city of Ponchatoula, you'll see police vehicles from other agencies outside of this parish. There's
Hmm.
men and women that live in this parish, law
Oh,
enforcement professionals. They have to go
sure.
elsewhere because they can't afford to work in Tangible Hope Parish. And
Yeah.
I want a TPSO unit parked in their driveway.
Well, yeah, I lived exactly what you just described. I lived for 20 years on 8th Street before I moved where I live now for a few years ago. And across the street, directly in front of my house, I would look at a St. John's Sheriff's unit every day because one, and this is a guy I grew up with and
Yep.
knew, but one of Ponchatoula's best and brightest was leaving the parish to go, for a job. So that happens. Speaking of great law enforcement people in our community, and Sheriff, this will be probably our final quote because I do need to get you back to your beautiful wife and family. But a local prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Taylor Anthony, who
Hey,
is a
Taylor.
renowned prosecutor, he says he appreciates you, Sheriff. You have an incredibly difficult job, and you're always willing to have open discussions with your constituents. And Taylor says that's admirable, and I agree. Sheriff, as we close here, and we think about Taylor's comment about these open, how can, if people have questions for you and they want to ask, how can people reach you? What's the best way for people to have an open, honest discussion with you about your plans for the department moving forward?
Sure. Look, we will be hosting community meetings across the
Mhm.
parish. If your church or your civic organization wants to invite me to come visit and explain it, or if you have an HOA meeting, in your subdivision, or if you just have a question, you pick up the phone and call. Look, my number's out there. It's been out there since day one, 985-630-0103. That's why the couple times I got kicked off your podcast is because my phone's ringing,
People are
and
calling. Yeah.
yeah, and but yeah, I invite people to engage. If you have serious questions, legitimate issues, I I am accessible in as much as I can be, and I am responsive. I do my level best to return every phone call. It might take me a little bit, but I do value. And I take very serious the calling that God's put upon me to serve the
Yeah.
people of this parish.
And Sheriff, if you don't mind, I'm going to make a plea to folks who call you to give you some grace and patience there, because I have no idea what it's like to be sheriff of a 140,000 person parish, but I did spend 24 years as the son of a sheriff when it was probably half that size or fewer. And what I can tell you was just at the house, not even counting the 50, 60, whatever calls a day my dad would get at the office, but he would get approximately 25 phone messages a day. This is on the old plug-in,
Sure. Yeah.
recorder. But so folks need to know, while your problem is the center of your universe and it's important, I'm sure the sheriff understands that, but it's probably one of hundreds that he's receiving that day and that he's doing his best to triage and get back to. So, and Sheriff, if I'm wrong there, correct me, but folks don't get that, but I've lived it watching my dad come home from working a hard day and realizing there's 24 messages waiting.
Sure.
And it's some people with some really heavy stuff there because it's law and order.
No,
And
absolutely. And I do have a heart for the people. I have a heart for the citizens, and I want to do my level best to help everybody, because um, and I'm honored that someone, calls, and nothing gives me greater joy than to be able to help somebody. And there's some times that I can't, but all I can do is explain to them, straightforward and honest that, look, this is your situation. I can't do this because the law says such and such, or the department policy says such and such. And by and large, the majority of people, respect that. They respect at least an honest no if you can't help them. And
right.
it's human nature to dwell on the negative, and so just got to remind ourselves. there's so much more positive than negative. And, God's called me to it. And, as we're talking about Joe Thomas earlier, his famous saying, "There's only been one perfect person who's ever walked the face of the earth, and we crucified him."
Amen to that. Well, thank you for that, Sheriff, and thank you for answering that call and stepping up into the big job with big problems on the horizon, to take it on and to conquer them. As we close, is there anything else on your mind, on your heart, anything else you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers before we go?
Well, again, I just like to thank, the people of this parish for electing me. I wake up every day and do my level best to keep the promises that I made. And like you just pointed out, I just ask for grace where I do fall short. We live in a very unforgiving culture, and it's always one for instant gratification. And the old saying is no I in team, but there isn't an M and an E. So sometimes people tend to get selfish, and
Yeah.
I just want to thank the people of this parish for electing me and entrusting me in this position. And just always just keep that in mind. And we're doing our level best to show through transparency, through our social media page and press releases, this is the people's sheriff's office, and I'm their sheriff. And whether they send me home in 2 years or 12 or 20 years, Bible says it's God that raises leaders up and brings them down. And so I don't covet this position, but I really do cherish, and I have a deep, profound appreciation for the unique position that I'm in.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, for sharing your heart and your plan and so much of yourself in this interview. We really appreciate it. To the folks watching or listening at home, I thank for you for sticking with us to the end. I think for the sheriff's patience with us going a little over, I'm glad we did, because he covered some great points. And to those of you that watch Ponchatoula Live, thank you, and we'll see you again next week. Y'all
Thank
take
you,
care.
Parker.
Bye-bye.